Close your eyes for a moment. Forget the world of screens and steel around you. Let the noise of the 21st century fade into a distant hum. I want you to travel back with me. Back 2,000 years. The air is warm and dusty, filled with the scent of olive wood fires and exotic spices. The language you hear is a mix of Aramaic, Greek, and the harsh commands of Latin. The year is 30 AD, and we are about to walk the streets of the most revered, most volatile, and most important city on earth, Jerusalem. For many of us, the Jerusalem of the Bible is a place of felt boards and dusty maps, a two-dimensional backdrop for familiar stories. But today, we're going to change that. We're going on a guided tour to virtually walk the same stone paths that Jesus and his disciples walked. We will explore the city not just as a historical location, but as a living, breathing character in the gospel narrative. Because to understand the events that changed the world, we must first understand the world in which they happened. This is Jerusalem in the time of Jesus. Our journey begins, as it did for most pilgrims on the road, looking up. Jerusalem is a city on a hill, a fortress of faith surrounded by deep valleys. As you approach from the east, cresting the Mount of Olives, the first thing that strikes you is the sheer, breathtaking grandeur of the temple. It is an ocean of dazzling white marble and brilliant gold, so bright that it's almost painful to look at in the midday sun. The Jewish historian Josephus, who saw it with his own eyes, said that to a stranger, it appeared like a mountain covered in snow. This is Herod's temple, a massive, ongoing construction project, and it is the undisputed center of the Jewish universe. We descend the Mount of Olives, cross the Kidron Valley, and approach the city walls. These are not quaint, medieval walls. They are imposing fortifications, a statement of power and security. We enter through one of the bustling northern gates, and immediately, we are plunged into a sea of humanity. This is not a quiet, homogeneous town. Jerusalem during a festival season, like the Passover we are imagining, is a cosmopolitan explosion of sight and sound. You see Jewish pilgrims who have traveled for weeks, their faces telling stories of faraway lands like Babylon, Alexandria, even Rome. You see stoic, armor-clad Roman soldiers, a constant, occupying presence, their watchful eyes a reminder of who is truly in charge. You hear merchants hawking their wares, money changers clinking coins, and the bleating of sheep destined for sacrifice. We make our way into the lower city, the crowded, vibrant heart of everyday life. The streets are narrow, winding, and paved with uneven stones. Simple, stone and plaster houses are built close together, their flat roofs used for work and for sleeping on hot nights. The air is thick with the smells of life. Baking bread from a communal oven, pungent spices in the marketplace, the ever-present scent of livestock. We push through the crowds to a place of both desperation and hope, the Pool of Bethesda. Here, under 5 covered colonnades, hundreds of sick, lame, and blind people lie on mats. The air is heavy with sorrow, but also with a faint glimmer of hope, a belief that the waters here hold the power to heal. It is in this very place of human suffering that Jesus would approach a man who had been an invalid for 38 years and ask him a life-changing question. Do you want to get well? From here, we walk south, through the city's bustling market, the Shuk, where you can buy everything from fresh fish to pottery to fine textiles. We arrive at another vital landmark, the Pool of Siloam. This is not a stagnant pool. It is a reservoir of fresh, flowing water, fed by Hezekiah's tunnel, a remarkable engineering feat carved through solid rock centuries earlier. This is where the city comes for its living water. It is a place of ritual purity, a place of community. And it is here that Jesus would send a man born blind, telling him to wash in the pool. A man who would leave the city walls in darkness and return with his sight, a walking, talking miracle that would send shockwaves through the city. This is the Jerusalem of the people, a city of commerce and community, of suffering and hope, of Roman occupation and fervent Jewish faith. But all of this, the markets, the pools, the bustling streets, was just a prelude. As we begin to ascend the great stone staircases, we move towards the city's true heart, its glorious and terrifying center of power and worship, the Temple Mount. As we ascend the grand southern stairs, the cacophony of the lower city begins to fade, replaced by a growing sense of awe. You are now entering the Temple Mount, a vast, man-made platform the size of 24 football fields, and the most sacred, contested piece of ground on the planet. This is the religious, social, and economic heart of Judaism.
The first area we enter is the massive outer court, known as the Court of the Gentiles. It is a sprawling open-air plaza, paved with magnificent stone slabs. This is the only place where non-Jews are permitted, and it is a hive of activity. The air hums with the low murmur of prayer, the animated arguments of religious debate, and most prominently, the sounds of commerce. This is where you would find the money changers and those selling doves and oxen. To a modern mind, a marketplace and a house of worship seems sacrilegious, and it had indeed become corrupt. But it served a necessary function. Pilgrims needed to exchange their Roman coins, which bore the image of the emperor, for the Tyrian shekel to pay the annual temple tax. They also needed to purchase ritually pure animals for sacrifice. But this necessary service had devolved into an exploitative enterprise, turning a house of prayer into a noisy, chaotic bazaar. It is in this very court that Jesus, filled with holy zeal, would braid a whip of cords and drive the merchants out, overturning their tables and crying out, "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers." It was a shocking act, a direct challenge to the corrupt temple authorities, and a declaration that the worship of his Father was meant to be accessible to everyone. As we move deeper into the complex, we come to a low stone wall, a barrier known as a soreg. Etched into this wall are inscriptions in Greek and Latin, stark warnings that have been unearthed by archaeologists. They read, "No foreigner may enter within the balustrade and the enclosure surrounding the sanctuary. Whoever is caught will have himself to blame for his ensuing death." This is a visceral reminder of the strict separation, of the increasing levels of holiness we are now entering. Passing through the beautiful gate, we enter the court of the women. Here, both Jewish men and women could gather for worship. Along its walls are the 13 trumpet-shaped chests of the treasury. It is here that Jesus would sit and watch the crowds, observing the rich putting in their large sums, before pointing out a poor widow who quietly drops in 2 small copper coins, everything she had to live on. From here, only Jewish men can proceed into the court of Israel. The atmosphere now is thick with the sacred. Before us stands the imposing stone structure of the temple itself, and in front of it, the great altar of burnt offering. This is the spiritual center of the nation. The air is heavy with the scent of incense and burning sacrifices. Priests in white linen robes move with solemn purpose. This is a place of blood and fire, a constant, visceral reminder of the gravity of sin and the high cost of forgiveness. The temple building itself is breathtaking, its entrance adorned with a massive golden vine. Only the priests are allowed to enter the first room, the holy place. But beyond that, behind a second, enormous, intricately woven veil, lies the most sacred place on earth, the Holy of Holies. In the days of Solomon, this room housed the Ark of the Covenant, but by Jesus' time, it was empty. Still, it represented the very dwelling place of God, a space of such awesome and unapproachable holiness that only one person, the high priest, could enter it, and only on one day of the year, the Day of Atonement. This temple, which seemed so permanent, was the very building Jesus predicted would be destroyed. But even before that, on the day of his crucifixion, the Gospels tell us that the moment he died, the great veil of the temple, the one separating the holy place and the Holy of Holies, was torn in two from the top to the bottom. It was a supernatural sign, a declaration that the barrier between God and humanity was now broken. Access to the very presence of God was no longer limited by stone and ritual. A new, living way had been opened. But Jerusalem was not just a city of worship. It was a city of power, politics, and ultimately, of pain. Our tour now moves from the sacred mountain to the mansions of the elite, and finally, to the places that would forever be marked by betrayal, judgment, and sacrifice. We leave the sacred mountain behind and make our way to the upper city on the western hill. This is the Beverly Hills of ancient Jerusalem. The streets here are wider, the air is cleaner, and the homes are not simple dwellings but luxurious villas. built around spacious inner courtyards. This is where the wealthy and the powerful lived, the ruling class and the priestly aristocracy, families who grew rich from the temple economy. It is here, in one of these opulent mansions, that we find the palace of Caiaphas, the high priest. And it is in the courtyard of this very palace that some of the darkest moments of the Gospels unfold. After Jesus is arrested in the dead of night in the Garden of Gethsemane, he is dragged here to face an illegal, nighttime trial before the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council. It is a sham trial, a conspiracy of the powerful to eliminate a perceived threat. And as Jesus stands inside, facing false accusations, his most outspoken disciple, Peter, stands outside in the courtyard, warming himself by a fire. And it is here, surrounded by the servants of the high priest, that Peter, out of fear, denies knowing his Lord 3 times, just as Jesus had predicted. The upper city, a place of earthly power, becomes a scene of profound spiritual and personal failure. From the seat of Jewish power, we move to the ultimate symbol of Roman occupation, the Fortress Antonia. This massive, imposing fortress loomed over the northwest corner of the Temple Mount, its 4 towers casting a constant shadow over the sacred courts. It was a Roman barracks, a visible reminder of who was in control, strategically placed to watch over crowds and quell any potential uprising. Inside this fortress is the Praetorium, the official residence of the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. And it is to this place that Jesus is brought at dawn. Here, in this hall of Roman justice, the King of Kings stands trial before a conflicted, earthly politician. We can almost hear the echoes of the scene, the roar of the crowd in the courtyard below, manipulated by the chief priests, shouting for the release of a murderer and the crucifixion of an innocent man. It is here that Jesus is brutally scourged, and here that the Roman soldiers, in a moment of cruel mockery, press a crown of thorns onto his head, drape a purple robe over his bleeding back, and kneel before him, sneering, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Our tour now takes its final, sorrowful steps. We follow the path from the fortress, back out into the crowded city streets. This is the Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering, a condemned man, forced to carry his own instrument of execution, stumbles through the same narrow streets we explored earlier, past the same markets, through the same cosmopolitan crowds of pilgrims who had come to the city for a holy festival, only to become spectators at a Roman execution. The final destination lies outside the city walls. Executions were not performed in the holy city, but in a place of uncleanness and death. We arrive at a grim, abandoned stone quarry, a place whose name is echoed through history, Golgotha, the place of the skull. It is here, on this barren hill of shame, that the story seems to end. Here, Jesus is crucified between 2 thieves. Here, the creator of the universe is executed by his creation, and as he dies, he is placed in a nearby tomb, a rich man's tomb carved out of rock, and a great stone is rolled across the entrance. Our tour of the physical city of 30 AD ends here, at a borrowed grave. We have walked its bustling streets, marveled at its glorious temple, stood in the halls of its powerful rulers, and now we stand at a place of death. We have seen that Jesus' life and ministry touched every single part of the city, and by extension, every part of the human experience. He was with the sick at the pool, the merchants in the court, the powerful in their halls, and the dying on a cross. But the story of Jerusalem and the story of the Bible does not end at a sealed tomb, because 3 days later, in the quiet of a Sunday morning, that stone was rolled away, and that tomb was found empty. The true, enduring power of this ancient city is not found in its mighty walls or its golden temple. It is found in an empty grave, a sight that declared to the world that God's love is stronger than humanity's hatred, and that life is stronger than death. If this journey back in time has deepened your understanding of the world of the Gospels, please give this video a like and subscribe for more immersive explorations that bring the Bible to life. Join us as we continue to discover the historical reality and the timeless truth of these sacred stories.